Hello, hello. Okay, I said I was doing this chapter by chapter, and that's what I'm going to continue to do. This is Genesis chapter 11, and it's going to be quick because it's just a lead in, really, to chapter 12. It's very short, and of course, it's at the end of the plagues. We're getting to the final chapter, the death of the firstborn, and this is basically God telling Moses about the plague of the firstborn and what's going to happen. Now, remember, I got to adjust this. Pharaoh had, whether it was this Pharaoh or the previous one, his father, whoever, had genocide an entire generation of boys for the Israelites. Remember that. This is justice coming back. We talked about I'm not going to go into it all again. I talked to it in length in my last video about the arguments of justice. This is justice happening. So I'm not going to get into it all over again about Pharaoh's heart being hardened and the reasons for it and why it's both important, necessary, and obvious that this is the way it was going to be anyway, just on looking at it psychologically. But let's just get into Genesis chapter 11. I'm reading from the New Living Translation, not the best translation for direct scripture, but just makes understanding what they're saying here quite a bit easier. Verse 1, Then the Lord said to Moses, I will strike Pharaoh and the land of Egypt with one more blow. After that, Pharaoh will let you leave this country. In fact, he will be so eager to get rid of you that he will force you all to leave. Tell all the Israelites, men and women, to ask their Egyptian neighbors for articles of silver and gold. It's a Jewish thing to do. Now the Lord had caused the Egyptians to look favorably on the people of Israel, and Moses was considered a very great man in the land of Egypt, respected by Pharaoh's officials and the Egyptian people alike. Remember who Moses is. Now there are arguments, not good ones. I don't think they're very strong, and doesn't really change the story much, but there was a monotheistic king or prince who took over, ruled as Pharaoh in Egypt for a while, and was kind of like driven out. His record was wiped out as clean as they could, and he's kind of not talked about in the histories. And there's arguments that this is Moses himself, because remember, he's raised as like a prince, so they say. I don't think he was raised so much as a prince. I made it clear that I think he's more so raised as like a child of two worlds, not really being accepted in either one, and it causes him to be lost, in life in a lot of ways, in his early life until he finds God. But understand, God causes this to happen because God causes everything to happen. But let's just examine it, like I always say, from just an open-minded psychological perspective here. Moses was raised among the officials and the elites of the Egyptians. He was raised with the Egyptians, and he was known among the Egyptians. Doesn't say much whether he's hated or loved, but he was known. Maybe he was beloved. Maybe he was well-liked. But he comes back. And yes, he brings these plagues onto Egypt. But you have to understand, when we got to this, the Pharaoh's officials and servants in the previous chapters, they're starting to see that Moses is right. It was long ago, long before these last few plagues, that the servants and the officials realized the strength of the God of Israel. Not necessarily that they realized they should be worshiping him, but they realized his strength, and they saw Moses as being in the right. Really, they couldn't figure out. We read it in the last chapter how Pharaoh's servants like, just let him go. We're ruined. Don't you see that we're already destroyed? And every time along the way, the officials and the servants and the people of Egypt are seeing the Israelites not being affected, and in a lot of cases, helping those affected, helping the Egyptians. You have to understand charitable nature, Christianity. When you hear the term Judeo-Christian, that's kind of a false term in my opinion, but the only reason it makes sense is because the Christians were Jews. Jewish people, the ones that continued on to follow Christ, that's Judeo-Christian, because Christ fulfilled the scripture. He didn't change it. He fulfilled it. So in that sense, like these ancient Jewish people are the modern Christians. Understand that. The charitable nature of being kind to your fellow man and treating others the way you would want to be treated. This is logos. This is truth. And they knew this. So while these plagues are going on and Israel's not really being affected, you're telling me that these charitable people of God, the good ones, the followers of Logos, even though they didn't know him as Christ, followers of Christ at this time, weren't helping out their neighbors, the Egyptians? Of course they were. This is what causes them to be looked at favorably. They see Moses every step of the way saying, hey, Pharaoh, just let us... Again, he's not even asking yet for all of his people to leave forever. He's saying, give us 3 days in the wilderness to offer sacrifice and pray to our God. And Pharaoh's saying no. His people are seeing him say no, seeing the plagues come upon him, the plagues that Moses warned him about beforehand, seeing him lie to Moses, saying, yes, yes, pray that it will stop, and then I'll let your people go. The Egyptians are seeing this happen, seeing Moses plea for Egypt to his God, seeing his God stop the plague, and then seeing Pharaoh go back on his word. So even if you're on Pharaoh's side as far as, it's like being a Democrat or Republican. It doesn't matter. If you see your candidate, I'm not getting into that. If you see the person on your football team doing terrible things like beating his girlfriend or, rape or something like that, you don't still support that person just because he played for your football team. No, you see him as the bad guy. That's how the world works. That's how we all work. And that's how the Egyptians were working. They were seeing Pharaoh clearly as the dumb or the guy or the bad guy or in the wrong or whatever have you. They're like, why don't you just let them go pray to their God? Look at what their God's doing to us. He clearly wants his sacrifices. Let them do it. What is your deal, Pharaoh? And Pharaoh's like, I can't let any of my power go. What if they don't come back? And God's hardening his heart. So, yes, God causes the Egyptians to look favorably upon the Hebrews when they come asking for articles of silver and gold. But how did he cause it? He caused it by, in their hearts, making them want to serve him, by being charitable. And this charitable nature caused the Egyptians to want to be charitable back towards them when they came and said, hey, we need, we're in desperate times, or we're about to go into the wilderness, or whatever they said, we just need this. Because think about it. First off, I told you, and God told Moses, he's going to just basically wipe Egypt out. Like, they're never going to be powerful again. They're never going to be wealthy again. Here's a lot of their wealth and their labor force leaving. And this is what they're owed for the years of free labor they've been doing. God's giving it back to them and taking it away from the corrupt Egypt. And these people look favorably upon them because of the charitable nature that they showed to the Egyptians. And that's how God caused them, because it was God. I'm not saying it wasn't God, but God through us. Now, I'm not saying that you take the responsibility of, yes, it was through me and my good actions that something good happened. No. God worked through you, but it was still God. Just like right here. God caused the Egyptians to look favorably. How did he cause them? Well, he, made the Hebrews charitable, and Moses seemed like he was in the right. But that was the actions of the individuals. No. The individual does not take that on himself. We are not saved through our own actions. It is through grace and grace alone. And grace caused grace. Grace caused the Jewish people to be graceful towards the Egyptians when they needed help. And now the Egyptians, because of that grace that all stems from God, are showing it to them. The way I look at it is the sun is this isn't a sun god thing. It's just an analogy. But sun causes all energy. Sends down photosynthesis within the plants. A cow eats the plants, gets the energy. We eat the cow, we get the energy. It all comes from the sun, right? That's how it works with God and grace and his good deeds. We may be a link along the chain in our good actions, which is why we should always be willing to serve God. But it's because God's working through us. It's not us doing it. It's because that's what a servant does. A servant serves when their master gives them an order. He doesn't just take it upon himself to do a whole bunch of stuff. Big tangent, but to realize that's what it's going on. They're looking favorably because of their graceful actions. Now they're asking for silver and gold. I couldn't avoid it. Sorry, I made that joke earlier. But Again, this is not uncommon, especially for the Egyptians who now are looking favorably and realizing how they've been treating the Israelites, and the Israelites haven't been bad back towards them. They feel guilty. They want to give them these things because they know they've been using them as a slave labor force for generations, and they wiped out a generation of the Israelites' baby boys. Okay. Verse 4. Moses had summoned to Pharaoh, "This is what the Lord says. At midnight tonight I will pass through the heart of Egypt. All the firstborn sons will die in every family in Egypt, from the oldest son of Pharaoh, who sits on his throne, to the oldest son of the lowliest servant girl who grinds the flour. Even the firstborn of all the livestock will die. Then a loud wail will rise throughout the land of Egypt, a wail like no one has heard before or will ever hear again. But among the Israelites it will be so peaceful that not even a dog will bark. Then you will know that the Lord makes a distinction between the Egyptians and the Israelites." I'm going to stop there. Verse 8. I want to reread verse 7 real quick. "But among the Israelites it will be so peaceful that not even a dog will bark. Then you will know that the Lord makes a distinction between the Egyptians and the Israelites." Remember, and I just went into how the Israelites have been kind. Egypt is kind back to them and giving them by looking at them favorably. Understand, though, and this is a difficult thing for people to comprehend in modern life because it affects us so personally. That might be a good person, or that might be someone who's doing good at this moment. That doesn't mean they're saved. Egypt didn't want to worship the God of the Israelites. Egypt didn't respect the God of the Israelites. Egypt now fears the God of the Israelites. That's why they look favorably upon them. They see that their God has power. But that does not mean that they don't still follow their God, their false, fake God. So they're looking at things. The Egyptians, a lot of them are still who aren't Pharaoh, because Pharaoh, his heart's hardened. He's in total grabbler mode. So he's not even on the plate here. This is the officials who are still seeing things sort of reasonably. They still don't really see a difference. Our magicians who follow Ra or, Horus or whatever, Osiris, they perform miracles. They've done amazing things, and all we need to do is perform greater sacrifices to our God. They are still following their God. They still look at their God and the God of Israel as on equal playing field. Like, this God got an upper hand here, but our God will get an upper hand here. That's how they're still viewing it. They don't see that this is God, that the God of Israelites is God, period, capital G. He's just another one of the gods to them. This makes a distinction. This shows, no, I am God. Not a whisper will be heard in the land of Israel. A wailing unlike nothing that's ever been heard or will be heard again. Well, let's think about that. That's powerful because at the beginning of Exodus, there was quite a wailing when they genocided all the Hebrew boys of an entire generation. And this is more powerful than that. And it's justice coming back. People will use this so often. My favorite show of all time, South Park, still is of all time my favorite. One of the recent seasons did an episode of Cartman dreaming about this, and it kind of made a joke about how God wouldn't do this sort of thing. But that's because we don't understand God. We don't understand Him because we're not Him. We can never comprehend Him. But one thing, don't scratch on it, that you have to know about God is He's just, righteous, and loving. And because you don't think something is just doesn't mean God doesn't see it from all perspectives and knows that it's just. people who look at this, first off, they didn't even read the whole Bible, because I think I've made a great case over these last few chapters of how it is just. It is justice, and it is blind justice as well. It's not, the judge who looks harsher on this person than he does on this person because this is from kid's from his neighborhood and this kid's from a bad neighborhood. No, that's a corrupt judge. That's not God. God is just because he's just, because justice is what he is. Righteous, loving justice. Well, this isn't loving. Well, if you're not just, you're not loving. A loving man, as much as he is loving, he has to be just, and just out of love. And that's what God is doing here. He is justfully doing these things. And he's using them to show his might, that he is God, so that future generations and future civilizations will not take the road of Egypt and blaspheme him in so many ways that cause corruption and cause such evil that they have caused. Oh, but he's so mean, he's so cruel. Pish posh. If you knew what the Egyptians were doing, you would have burnt them alive yourself and out of revenge, which is wrong. God does it because it's righteous to do. So many fools out there can't understand the difference, because they could only do something out of revenge. Revenge and justice might look like the exact same thing, but how your heart feels when you do it, what you do in your heart, is the difference. Are you doing it from revenge and hate? Or are you doing it out of love and justice and righteousness? It's the story of God from the beginning. He is loving, he is just, and he is righteous. And he can't be one of those without the others. Because you're not truly just if you're not doing it from a loving heart. Again, revenge can look like justice. If you're doing it out of revenge, you're not loving. God doesn't operate that way. Verse 8, all the officials of Egypt will run to me and fall to the ground before me. Please leave, they will beg. Hurry and take all your followers with you. Only then will I go. Then, burning with anger, Moses left Pharaoh. Now the Lord had told Moses earlier, Pharaoh will not listen to you, but I will do even more mighty miracles in the land of Egypt. Moses and Aaron performed these miracles in Pharaoh's presence, but the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart, and he wouldn't let the Israelites leave the country. Pharaoh doesn't believe it. Either he doesn't believe it's going to happen or he doesn't care it's going to happen. He'll care afterwards, that's for sure. And again, it's God's fault because he hardened Pharaoh's heart. Why didn't he just soften Pharaoh's heart? Shut up. People out there, they're just such fools. They're such fools. They would crumble the minute they were given any power into corruption. If you can't see that this is so righteous and so just, and it was the only way it was going to be, and even if you don't want to accept that it was, even if God hadn't hardened Pharaoh's heart, Pharaoh and Egypt were already condemned. Already. Now God will use their evil that condemned them for good, by showing every future generation that cares to hear the word that this way of building a civilization will lead to destruction and death, even if it isn't by God's hand directly like this. Egypt was already falling. They couldn't rely on the Hebrew labor force forever. Their Pharaoh was crazy. He took away the straw that they gave them to make the bricks. These were once a powerful people, these Hebrews. They could easily go join up with another tribe, defeat or fight off Egypt. Doesn't matter. All right. So that's chapter 11. It went longer than I thought, but I just have to get this out there because this is the number one thing. The big plague, the Passover and the death of the firstborn, that people want to use this in like Sodomy and Gomorrah and Jericho and some of the conquests. And we'll get into all of it. How the Old Testament got so mean and cruel. Ugh. It's like, were you ever punished by your dad once in your life? I mean, my goodness. These people were evil. It wasn't like, oh, they just had a hard time controlling their desires every now and then. No. Learn your history. All right. That's Genesis chapter 11. Everyone have a wonderful morning, afternoon, evening, or good night. God bless.